as we invite and welcome more participants. Just before we start, regrettably, we have to inform you that the program will be slightly shortened as we receive some news that one of our participants, Alexander Hammond, is unfortunately attending to some private matters, as he has some family members in the Ukraine, and we all know the conflict and current situation at the moment. So the program will be slightly shortened, but nonetheless, we look forward to a great event. So let's give another minute or so to welcome participants, and the next voice you will hear will be that of Fred Seka from Rwanda, who is, of course, our Vice-Chair. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members. Am I loud clear?
Good afternoon, Fred. You are perfectly clear. You can go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jacob. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, all the participants in this meeting. Good afternoon, our honorable speakers. And I want to take this small moment to welcome everyone this meeting, webinar meeting, on this our topic of practically tackling on NTBs in the East and South Africa region. In this meeting of this afternoon, we wish to have a clear, and we are happy to have some expert and experienced people who has more details and expertise in them to share with the audience on this meeting of the WCO East and Southern Africa Regional Private Sector Growth. I want to welcome everyone. I want to share with, as we know all of us, AfCFTA as a division of Africa, where we are heading all of us as a one market. We need to be known. There will be more NTBs. How to overcome the NTBs? It's the way our message, it's one of our objectives to advocate, to think about and ahead, how can we overcome these NTBs to be able to trade between ourselves as Africans and beyond. Now this evening we'll have to have our good speakers who has more experience on this, where now we'll have to be able to follow and ask. I want again to welcome all of you, be able and active in this meeting. But before we start our meeting, I'll be asking the audience to be now following these things as is following. Please, let's all of us who are not speaking, mute our microphone and switch off our videos. Again, let's make sure of the chat function to ask questions. 3, the panelists them allowed will be on the video during their presentations. And all presentations will be shared on the website. There will be also further questions which will be used at Q&A. In this meeting again, we regrettably do not have Alexander Hammond, who was our third speaker, but due to his private issues, he will not be with us. Let's hopefully by next, we will not miss him, we'll be together with him. At this stage, I want again to remind we as the member and the participant audience, the WCO, our advocacy on these NTBs in East and Southern Africa region, we need to be tackled on in deeper to know exactly what will be, how to overcome, what the challenges, and what is also the opportunity in this region of Africa. By not taking more time of yours, I would like now to introduce on this our speakers, which will be the 2 speakers to this afternoon. And the 2 speakers will be now given. The first one will have the time. Normally each speaker was having 20 minutes. She will have a minute to 20 minutes. And also after her speech, we'll go to the Q&A for leaving a 5 minutes. Then after, other questions will follow, will come as on the chat. And the second speaker will be also follow after those Q&A we are having. Let me now start by the first speaker. I want to introduce to her on the audience. As you have seen on the screen, I want to talk about a brief on our speaker, which is more important to know who is our speakers of this evening. Our speakers' biographies. We are having now the first speaker. She's Kuena Molapo. She's a senior expert NTB TBT SPS AfCFTA Secretariat. Kuena Molapo is the Program Management Officer at United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. She's currently seconded as the non-tariff barriers expert at the AfCFTA Secretariat. She is responsible for the implementation of Annex 5, 6, and 7, NTBs, TBT, and SPS of the AfCFTA agreement. She works as an expert on standardization, quality assurance, accreditation, and methodology of SADC Secretariat, monitoring technical barriers to the trade and discriminatory, sanitary, and phytosanitary barriers. She is a holder, a Master of Engineering degree in Quality Management from the RMIT University in Australia, and bachelor's of the Science from the National University of Lesotho. I would request it's my humble to request our first speaker, to take a floor and go ahead to share with her experience. You're most welcome, Madam Molapo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Seka. It is my pleasure and great pleasure really to be here speaking on the tackling non-tariff barriers in the southern and eastern regions. And what I will be doing really is to present to you the mechanism, the non-tariff barriers mechanism as developed by the AfCFTA Secretariat in the quest to reduce or to eliminate non-tariff barriers that will occur or that are occurring. That are occurring in the AfCFTA. So as already introduced, my name is Kuena Molapo, and I'm currently based in Accra, responsible for the implementation of Annex 5, Annex 6, and Annex 7, wholly in the areas of technical barriers to trade, if you wish. Now, what I will do really is to bring before you what the mandate of the AfCFTA Secretariat is in the context of Annex 5 on non-tariff barriers, and just to briefly present to you the tool that has been developed to try and extend the hand to the private sector in the quest to reduce how long it takes, or how long it takes to respond for government to respond to some of the reported non-tariff barriers. So I'm going to actually start by going to the mechanism itself. So I'm going to share my screen here with you. Okay, I think that's fine. I will share my screen this way with you, and then I'll take you through it briefly. But before I do that, what I'll do is just say in the negotiations of the AfCFTA Secretariat of the AfCFTA, there was a need to have, as part of the provisions, and instruments that allows for monitoring, monitoring and elimination of non-tariff barriers. And Annex 5 was therefore negotiated as part of the legal text of the agreement. And one of the things that the agreement does, or the objective of the agreement of Annex 5 really, is to really facilitate how best governments, extend their hand to the private sector for, any potential challenges that may come along the way while the agreement is being implemented. We all know that with tariff liberalization, the potential of technical barriers to trade or other barriers, non-tariff barriers popping up, has been part of many trade agreements, and this is why this became very critical. Now, what the annex does, it also defines with the objectives to eliminate, it defines the context or the scope of the non-tariff barriers. It defines the scope of the non-tariff barriers. If you look at the text in Article 3 and also Appendix 1 of the text, where it is outlined or elaborated in full, it gives scope in terms of what are the non-tariff barriers, or what where to look for. And not everything is a non-tariff barrier. I know sometimes there are hurdles here and there that we may want to put as a scope for non-tariff barriers, but are not necessarily, according to the law, according to the text of the agreement, defined as non-tariff barriers. But we do have, for instance, we have technical barriers to trade that deal with issues of standards, technical regulations, conformity assessment. We have issues of sanitary and phytosanitary measures. We have customs and customs associated, administrative and entry procedures. We also have other government-related restrictions that come with some of the charges that are brought on by governments, by different governments. Now, the annex provides for a development of a mechanism, which is what we have in front of us today, that I will briefly talk to. In Article 12 of the annex, the mechanism, the annex points out that there should be a mechanism to report, monitor, and eliminate NTBs. Now, this is what we have before us. This work has been done with the help from UNCTAD, and it is a mechanism belonging to the AfCFTA Secretariat and now managed by the AfCFTA Secretariat. It is intended, if all things are in place, it is intended to reduce the time for governments to respond to some of the potential problems that the private sector have. It is meant to assist the private sector to report quickly online without having to go to any other place from wherever they are. And it is also meant to create an easy platform for different countries or different national focal points to speak within or to exchange communication within the system itself. I have to say the system itself is based on what already existed in the tripartite region. You all will be aware of that. We have the tripartite mechanism, which is tradebarriers.org.org, different, but the same mechanism was used to develop this one because this was already a used and proved, system to work, and it has been working well for the Southern and Africa, Eastern and Southern Africa region, or the tripartite region, if you wish. Now, this has now been escalated higher to the continental region, to the continental agreement, so that it can be used, because the tripartite one is only limited to the Southern and East African region, but the continental one now allows for the rest of the 54 countries to participate and be able to report their NTBs here. So with that background, I will just say that I will just briefly demonstrate it to you, and I'll say, if you look at what we have now, let me just say this, we cannot talk about this without acknowledging the mastermind behind all of this. This is Mrs. Vanessa Hove, who actually, came up and spearheaded this for the tripartite region, and it has now gone beyond the region, and it is now in the continent, and it continues to work for us, and we hope that it will be it will work even for the rest of the continent, for the regions that have not used it before. Now, if you look at what we have now on my shared screen, we have, if you go on to the www.tradebarriers.africa, you have this mechanism as you see it here. And you have the menu as you have it here. But the most important thing to note is that it is an online reporting mechanism. This section here, it means you report online. You can use a smartphone, you can use a computer, you can use a tablet, but immediately you go online, you have to report. Now on the homepage, we have what we have here, and then we have, if I click here, we have all of these sections here under the homepage that explain about the mechanism, how you use the mobile phone, what non-tariff barriers are, and the non-tariff barriers categories as you have them on the in the annex. So you don't even have to go to the annex itself, as I talked about it or referred to it earlier. You can even just go on to this mechanism and look at the documents as you have them. Now, when you go to the third menu here, you have a register complaint, active complaints, resolved complaints. Here, this is where you will find all of those. We'll come back to this just to show you how it works. And then on the documents here, you have the relevant documents that we currently have on the NTB mechanism. Now, and then there are events. This is not quite used yet, but I think we had a number of webinars in the last year, 2021, early 2021, and some of them are reported here, and then various links and contacts. Now, I want to show you how it works, because the most important part of this mechanism is for us to know how to register a complaint, But to be able to register a complaint, First and foremost, when I get here, you should at least have acquainted yourself with the manual. You have the manuals here on the mechanism on how to actually navigate through the mechanism. It is in the 4 languages, official languages of the African Union. I know that Swahili is now one of them, so we will soon have Swahili manual somewhere there. Hopefully Sesotho will become one later, and we can have Sesotho right there as well. However, to continue, the English manual is there. You can click there for you to be able to use this. Now, for you to be able to actually go to report, you have to register or log in as a registered user. So you must register here first, and all you need to do is to put in your email address. I'm just showing you as I go through it. You put in your email address here, and you log in, you register. This is helping you register. I am doing this because I have already registered and I am part of the administrative or back-end users of the mechanism. But you have to, if you're a new user, you log in and then you put in your credentials and go in through it. Now you see that I have been able to go in there as a user, but what you're seeing from my end, you're seeing it because I am a back-end user or an administrator, if you wish. Now, the most important thing about this is that what we have here is we have a number of complaints that have already been reported. I know that the tripartite one for the Southern and East African region, it has been working very well, and a lot of data is available on the platform. Now, this is just to present this to you, like in the context of the AfCFTA, we now have this because in the context of the AfCFTA, you cannot use the tripartite one unless it is within the regions or the countries within the tripartite. But if you're now trading with a country outside of the tripartite, you will need to use this continental mechanism. Now, once you are registered, you can now come to this area of complaints. The registration, what happens with the registration is that you will register, put in your, go to the register where I registered, and then you put in your credentials, and then it sends you a link that makes sure that you then have to authenticate and make sure that you are fully registered. And once you're fully registered, you can now easily register your complaint. Now, where I'll take you now is where you have to register your complaint. On this here as well, you have your manuals. This has been made in such a way that you can easily put your you can easily go through the manual if you are in doubt of anything, and then go on to report the manual that you are the NTB that you are supposed to report. Now, the first area here, you will see the areas that with a red asterisk, give you they are mandatory fields, so you must fill. So for you to fill a region or country, you have to put in, the country where you're reporting from. It is reporting country, and then you go to the next bit, or the next field is the details of occurrence. The details of occurrence have a number of sections on them. Any NTB that you are reporting or that you have encountered, you then have to report on the location, country or region, imposing country or region. It is an asterisk, it's mandatory, you must fill it. It also will give you an option here also on the countries. You don't have to be thinking about where, you just have to fill, and then the date of occurrence of the barrier or whatever you experienced as a private sector, and the type of barrier here. If you look at this, you don't have to think or worry about it because it has already, according to Annex 5, has already been filled there for you. You just have to go and select one which you think is this. But in all honesty, if you look at this, this is not a mandatory field. In case you don't know what it is, you don't have to worry about that. You just have to provide a detailed description of what took place. And we at the Secretariat will then help, in identifying which, part of it, because sometimes people don't know the technical languages, they just know what happened, and we can easily, slot that into whether it's an issue of customs, or it's an issue of technical barriers to trade, or phytosanitary, or any other barriers for that matter. Now, if you put the detailed description of the barrier or incident is mandatory, so you have to then explain all of that, and then we will then be able to capture it. Description of the products, this is also mandatory. You have to put what type of products are affected so that this will be easily clarified. Now, on the product value, this is also not mandatory, but it might be able to help, to gather in terms of gathering data on, how much was being affected. And then here, if you have any supporting documentation whatsoever, for instance, if it's a test result that you have, or that is in query, or that is in question, if it's a certificate of origin that is in query, and you are able to then choose the file, then you will be able to use this here without any, attach it here without any problems. And then you submit your complaint on this green button here. Once you've submitted, what then happens once you have submitted this? I will go back to this just to say what then happens is you then have the notification coming directly to the AfCFTA Secretariat. And once we have read it and seen what it is about, and if it falls within the scope of the annex, we then notify the relevant national focal points within the territories that are in question, or where the query is being reported from. Now, one other thing of importance that I didn't mention in the Annex 5 is provision for national focal points for monitoring and evaluation of monitoring and resolution of non-tariff barriers. So each state party is expected to have national focal points, national monitoring committees as mechanism or as national institutional arrangements for the resolution of NTBs. Now, most countries have now appointed their national focal points, and we have had some trainings with them in the past 2 years, because this mechanism was actually launched as part of the initial launch of the preliminary tools of the AfCFTA in 2019, July of 2019. So we've had a number of trainings already on the mechanism for some national focal points, so they will be able to be responding to some of those. So the expectation with all things being normal is that the national focal points of the reported country and the reporting country will begin to immediately engage on the matter, such that there is a quick resolution or quick turnaround time on the matters. Now, I want to we've had this reported, if you see some of this, and I'm going to just mention a few things on this while you look. If you look at, we have here transferred and transferred. This transferred is NTBs that are reported within, between countries that are within the same REC. And at REC level, the AfCFTA level, we do not engage at that level because we know that there are REC level mechanisms to actually respond to such. So if you look at this, this one is an issue between Kenya and Uganda, and it was understood that this will be actually dealt with at the REC level or tripartite level or East Africa level. So it was transferred from the AfCFTA level to that level. If it had been Kenya with, say, Ghana, this would have been dealt with in this one, in this particular one. Now, the difference with this, even as I make that point, the difference you will see, you have this one here, where you had Senegal and the Gambia, even though both are in the ECOWAS, since there isn't a mechanism within the ECOWAS to deal with this, it is dealt with at the continental level. Other countries or other regions or regional economic communities don't necessarily have, I was just looking at my time, don't necessarily have a mechanism, so they still deal with the issues at the continental level. I think I wanted to just mention this for the purposes of understanding the different levels of operation, because there was already work existing, and there is sometimes easier interaction between the REC level interactions, but the issues at continental, at the AfCFTA level, will be dealt with at this level. And in closing, I will just come back to the homepage. In closing, I'll come back to the homepage and talk about the mobile reporting via the mobile app. We understand also that the population, or many of the small and medium enterprises that are engaging in various trade activities across countries, may not necessarily have an online or internet, or some of the borders are not necessarily properly networked or connected. So we are currently working on a mobile reporting. There will be mobile reporting coming up soon. Hopefully by the end of this year, we will have a mobile reporting platform through SMS, and also an app that will be used for the broader, to extend, to the broader population that may not necessarily have access to online. Now, in closing, I'll say that the turnaround time, which is always what we talk about, and that what we hope to change, is that we need to respond quickly to the needs of the private sector, as those responsible in the government, and also at the AfCFTA Secretariat. There is need to respond within a short time, because we know that delays actually cause a tremendous loss of revenues as long as products remain, at the border, or are not able to cross for whatever reason. Does this mean everything will be covered? Not entirely, because you have some of those barriers that are based in legislation or in law that will require maybe governments to change certain things that it may not be within a certain period of time. And there are those issues that may be an issue of lack of information, which we must endeavor to continue to disseminate information as much as possible through various avenues, like the non-tariff measures, data collection, or making available issues on standards requirements within countries, or just making sure that the private sector is aware of laws that are being applied in any of the territories for compliance purposes. And so I'd like to say this has been made available by the AfCFTA to ensure that we do deal with, in the most practical way possible, talking easily without having to go to move or travel to a country, or all of that. And the information of who the focal points are within countries is available, and we are actually now even updating the information, and we will be sharing it widely to know who is responsible for what in what country. And I don't know if I have left anything, but I think I've taken more than the 20 minutes, and I'd like to leave it here, and I will respond to any other question that arises that I may not have covered as I continue to speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Madam Molapo, for the wonderful, great presentation. And I now really agree on this. You have went through on all details, the system, on NTBs, procedures. I would now like to allow some, if Mr. Jacob, if there's some questions on the screen, Q&A, you can lead for us, and then our speaker can respond before we join the next speaker. I think we can allow some few questions if there are. Like
sorry,
one or two.
Fred, if I may, I think we are slightly, just for Trudi Hartzenberg's presentation, we are slightly pressed for time. So I would suggest for Trudi to first go ahead, and then perhaps if there are any further Q&A afterwards for Madam Kuena to answer, we can do that afterwards, if that is fine with you.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, it's okay with me. Okay, let's now go to the next speaker. After our first speaker, we have chance also to have Madam Fred Seka. He's the Executive Director of the Trade Law Center. Her research is on international trade, competition policy, industrial development, and Africa's trade and integration agenda. She has a special interest in and commitment to the capacity building. She has designed and delivered academic and trade short courses on a broad range of trade-related topics for policymakers and other stakeholders in Africa. She currently serves on the WTO, this World Trade Organization, chairs advisory committee, and is a member of the Committee for the Development Policy of the United Nations Economic and Social Council. Madam Trudi Hartzenberg, we welcome you, and we are so lucky to have you in this discussion. Then you share with us your good experience, and we learn from there what we can do better more to fight with these NTBs. You're most welcome on your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair. It's a great pleasure to be with you this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I do apologize for having to leave a little bit earlier. I'm actually going to the Committee for Development Policy at the UN at 3 o'clock this afternoon, where we're discussing a lot of issues related to least developed countries in Africa, graduating from the category. But today, I would like to thank Kuena for her presentation on the NTB mechanism. I think this is such an important issue. We recognize that non-tariff barriers are far more pernicious and impact far more negatively on intra-Africa trade than do tariff barriers. So eliminating NTBs can bring a lot of development gains and certainly assist us to achieve the objectives of the AfCFTA. I've been asked to look very briefly at intra-Africa trade, the non-tariff barrier situation in East and Southern Africa, and non-tariff trade costs. So I will go through these quite quickly. Just to recognize, I think, as Kuena has also mentioned, intra-Africa trade is low by global standards. And if we track our intra-Africa trade performance from the early 2000s, we'll see that it hovers between 10 and 20% of Africa's total trade. It was rising very, very nicely until it reached a peak in 2015, but then started declining. And COVID, of course, pushed us further into declining territory. So for 2020, the last full year of trade data we have available at this stage, it is recorded at 16% of Africa's total trade. This is a list of the most traded products, the 10 most important traded products. And you'll see mineral products, crude oil in particular, being particularly important. chemical products, food, beverages, very important. We go through to transport equipment, vegetable products, and also to clothing and textile. It's number 10 in that group of most traded products. So this is where we're already trading with one another and where there is scope for further liberalization under the AfCFTA. But some of these products are very susceptible to non-tariff barriers. What we also have to note is that intra-Africa trade is very much concentrated within the neighborhoods, if I may put it that way, colleagues. So we find that we trade very much more with our immediate neighbors rather than countries further afield on the continent. And that's no surprise, partly because of the high trade costs, but there's also the important commercial integration which has developed over a long period of time as we have cross-border economic activities within regional economic communities. So if we focus on the East African community, that's the bottom corner here, and we just go around this pie chart, we'll see that trade with the Arab Maghreb Union, that's North Africa, is extremely small. With SENSAD, so in the North African region, the Sahel region, it reaches 21%. So we're starting to see the neighborhood effect kicking in. COMESA, which overlaps, of course, with the East African community, they are important partners. We then move along to ECAS, so that's Central Africa, so less important in terms of our trade profile. Then we have ECOWAS, so West Africa, that's further away and therefore more costly to trade with. But these are also trade partnerships that we will open up now with the AfCFTA. We move to IGAD, that brings us back to East and Southern Africa. And although IGAD doesn't have a trade arrangement among its members, we trade quite a bit with them. The most important trade relationship for the East African community as a group is with the SADC member states. So this just illustrates how important the neighborhood effects are. Of course, transport costs may well be lower, but there may be other efficiency gains in terms of trading specifically with our partners in close proximity. This may look rather familiar after Kuena's presentation. And as she indicated, the trade barriers eliminating mechanism of the AfCFTA is inspired very much by tradebarriers.org. This is the first non-tariff barrier eliminating mechanism that was developed in the early 2000s. In fact, it became active in 2004. And this mechanism has recorded over 700 successful resolutions of non-tariff barriers over this period. So for an analyst, this data is extremely rich to try to understand exactly the nature of non-tariff barriers in the East and Southern African region. This was, of course, developed when we started thinking about developing from the tripartite initiative to the tripartite free trade area. Those negotiations are still underway, although they have slowed down quite considerably. But the aim was to integrate the economies of all the member states in SADC, EAC and COMESA, 26 at that time. Subsequently, of course, we have South Sudan becoming independent, so there are now 27 countries in that negotiating process. Very similar to what Kuena pointed out for us, you register in advance, and I really would encourage all our traders and stakeholders in the trade value chain, our transporters, freight forwarders, logistics services providers, everyone to register on all of these non-tariff barrier portals. Because when you're faced with a non-tariff barrier, you may not be thinking about registration. So register well in advance. That's particularly important. There is, just as we have in the case of the AfCFTA portal, what is a non-tariff barrier? I think this is extremely important to know the categorization. This is very much inspired by what UNCTAD has done initially in terms of their catalog of non-tariff barriers, how to go about reporting it. There are notifications about developments related to NTBs and so on. So what we find is that this is a one-stop for all the non-tariff barriers that you may encounter when trading with other partners within this tripartite region. I think it's very important to recall what Kuena said, and that is, which portal do you report to when you encounter a non-tariff barrier? So if we're sitting in Rwanda and we're trading with Kenya, you would not be reporting to the AfCFTA portal, you would be reporting here. In other words, we go back to what is the applicable trade regime, and that follows then to the associated non-tariff barrier portal. Now, we're still negotiating the tripartite FTA agreement, but this portal is particularly active. So do take a look. This is just some statistics that I've drawn from here. There are currently 73 active complaints that are being investigated. Usually what happens is that an expert who has access to the back end and is able to do this will receive your complaint when you log it and then analyze it and make sure it is correctly categorized and then forward it to the appropriate agency, government department, whatever it might be for resolution. So this is such an important process to be aware of. You can track the progress of your NTB as it is resolved. The resolved complaints on this website, as I said, over 700 already. To give you a little bit of a flavor of the kind of NTBs that have been notified, they could be import bans, they could be about classification of products. So these are some examples that we can have a look at. South Africa has also launched its own national export barrier reporting mechanism. And at this stage, there's no website, so you can actually write to this email address. So if you are a South African trader and you encounter an export barrier, then you can contact, excuse me, the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition and log a complaint, and hopefully that will be resolved. It's a little bit still paper-based, we may say, because we don't have it all online just yet. It was supposed to be live in 2021, but we're still waiting for that to happen. The important point, I think, colleagues, is that there's a lot of focus on eliminating non-tariff barriers, which is particularly important for our trade, not only amongst ourselves, but if we eliminate non-tariff barriers, it has a multiplier effect to improve our efficiency and our trade competitiveness with whoever we trade. So if our customs and border management processes, governance processes are improved, there is a strong, broad multiplier effect from that, which is extremely important. Jacob has asked me to say a little bit about non-tariff trade costs, and there is a very useful database, the ESCAP World Bank Trade Cost Database. This is a live link, ladies and gentlemen, that you can follow and take a look at the data yourself. And it basically takes a look at a collection of non-tariff costs, transport costs, time at the border post, so dwell times and so on, and brings them together in an index. And this is the ad valorem equivalent. So the non-tariff trade cost is expressed in percentage format in a tariff equivalent. So for example, you may find that in the case of particularly agricultural products, they tend to have higher non-tariff trade costs than manufactured products for obvious reasons. You may find that the AVE, the ad valorem equivalent, is 140%, then that is 140% of the tariff that you would pay when you trade that product. So this is a useful comparison between the tariffs and the non-tariff costs. And this diagram here represents a comparison between agriculture trade costs measured along the horizontal axis here. So expressed in percentage terms for 175, 200 and so on, and manufacturing trade costs. And not surprisingly, we find South Africa in the bottom left-hand corner. So by comparison, relatively low non-tariff trade costs. You will see that the agriculture costs are a little bit higher than the manufacturing trade costs. So we're cutting over 175% here, where we're below 150 for manufactured. And you can have a look at your country here. We look at Mauritius, Malawi, DRC, and many others, and track the ratio that we find of agriculture non-tariff trade costs to manufactured trade costs. Now, this is in 2017. This data is rather difficult to collect, so we find that the current latest data available in the database takes us to 2019. Now, that's before COVID. So we can well expect that from 2020 onwards, these costs will have increased quite considerably. This is a comparison that we find here in terms of SADC, EAC, COMESA, and ECOWAS. So we're looking at the average costs here, and these are SADC trading with SADC and with other member states, EAC trading with EAC and with other RECs, COMESA trading amongst itself, but also with the other REC partners. So very much picking up from the pie charts we had a little bit earlier. And what we do see is that, of course, we should expect SADC partners trading with SADC. That should be much lower than trading with the neighbors. And if we look at the East African community, its intra-EAC costs are the lowest by quite a lot, quite a large margin of preference there in terms of non-tariff costs. So trading here with ECOWAS to be expected. This is the dark brown column here from EAC to ECOWAS. That's the highest among the regional economic community trade partners. ECOWAS trading amongst itself, of course, that's going to be pretty low. So this gives you a little bit of an idea. Here's a summary of some of that information to have a look at. I'm sorry, there is a lot of data. It really takes interest to have a look at these because you'll see that it actually makes a lot of sense. Now we take a look here, again comparing manufacturing and agriculture, and this is particularly interesting. Let's focus in the interest of time on the number of countries that we have on the right-hand side. So we move across from South Africa, the lowest ad valorem equivalent non-tariff trade costs, Congo, Zambia, Ivory Coast, Seychelles, Tunisia, Mauritania, Morocco, Egypt, and Liberia. So this is a profile of the costs. It reflects, of course, the very important contribution that non-tariff costs make to intra-trade cost of doing business. So it's really very important for us to take a look at these very carefully and try to bring down these non-tariff costs, because this improves not only the trade environment, but also the environment for cross-border value chain development. And that has become a very important focal point also in the case of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Just a quick snapshot here. If we take a look at manufactured products, the non-tariff trade costs, an average from 2015 to 2019, Zimbabwe, 372%, so way, way, way higher than the tariff equivalent. Botswana, 357, Chad, 356%, South Africa, 154, DRC, 170, and Mauritania, 181%. For agricultural products, these are higher, much higher. You will often see that landlocked countries, or in fact, island economies, tend to have much higher non-tariff trade costs. So Sao Tome and Principe, small island in the Gulf of Guinea, producing very good cocoa and also a good tourist destination, it has very high non-tariff trade costs. Ethiopia, very important as to be expected. Seychelles, again, South Africa and the Gambia. So this is a little bit of a window into taking a look at the non-tariff costs of doing business. And I think it's just a reminder to us that it is so important for us to eliminate non-tariff barriers. We can make significant improvements to our trading performance by doing that. Just very briefly, and Chair, I'm almost done here. We've heard in recent months and during the COVID pandemic, of course, what has been happening to freight costs, looking at maritime transport, container shortages, the imbalances between demand and supply of containers and so on. So this is data up to 2020. So it takes into account the first year of COVID. And this is the price per 40-foot container. So it takes a look at transport, maritime transport between regions. So these are, by their very nature, averages that we're looking at here. And just very briefly to compare, say if we're transporting a container from Asia to Africa, we see the cost of that container, according to this UNCTAD data, having increased on average from $1,800 to $2,112. Trading around the African continent, we've seen an increase from 1,812 in 2018 to on average 1,924. So I leave this, ladies and gentlemen, for you to have a look and to take a look at some of the data. This from the same UNCTAD study recently on transport trade costs, we find an assessment of time spent in the port. So these dwell times, one could say, within the port. And this rather squeezed diagram of the African continent then gives us a little bit of an overview of the range in terms of efficiency and performance of our ports. Now we know in certain countries there is a great deal that can be done to improve the situation. In others, a great deal of efficiency gains have been had. And we're starting to see a reconfiguration of supply and trade routes in response to those efficiencies. So this is something I think that we have to look at quite carefully. As I mentioned, the demand and supply asymmetries and container shipping demand and supply. What we see if we track the demand and supply performance, what we're seeing during COVID is a significant decrease in demand, not surprising at all. This indicates decrease in demand, particularly for commodities, and certainly in Africa, that's what we experience. We're starting to see as the recovery kicks in, demand is increasing, but supply is lagging. And this would also explain some of the high costs and the asymmetries and the shortages that we experience currently. Chair, I would like to stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Madam Rensburg. Thank you so much for your good presentation. Very interesting, very, very interesting. Where there is more research, precisions, numbers, and everything, where we need to look at it and see what we can even do ourselves as Africa, as Eastern Region Africa. We have to work on it. Without taking more time, let me also allow my colleague Jacob to guide us on some of the Q&A on our speakers, for the first speaker and the second one, as the third speaker are not available, as I mentioned earlier, due to his private issues on Ukraine and Russia. as we are aware, and we don't. Jacob, you can, as Secretariat, you can guide us on if there's some Q&A, and also allow the audience for the question, if there is, then our speakers can take time to respond to the questions. Jacob?
Thank you so much, Fred. I think once again, just for those viewers that joined us a bit late, we were supposed to have another speaker, Mr. Alexander Hammond, but unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, he could not join us. And also, unfortunately, Trudi had to jump off to another meeting starting at 3. So if there are any questions, especially pertaining to the online tool of the NTBs, as shown by my Kuena in terms of logging those, please, we encourage you to use the Q&A or the chat function even. And I can perhaps just start off this the Q&A session to ask that Kuena did allude to turnaround time, but I also wanted to, I was wondering about the success factor in terms of resolving these NTBs. So if I can pose this question to you, Kuena, is there a term, a success rate of resolving the NTBs and then the accompanying turnaround time? And then also a second part to the question is, what do you see as the evolution of this online tool? So I give it over to you, Kuena. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jacob. I think what I will like to say on the turnaround time is exactly, what I said earlier, that it really differs on the type of NTB reported. And this is the experience that I'm sharing, is the experience from the tripartite or the Southern, the tripartite tradebarriers.org experience, is that it really differs from time to time. If it's an issue that can be dealt with within 30 minutes to an hour, if it's something that needs a call to verify a certain document or something, or this is usually done within very reasonable time. But you then have some that take a bit of time, where consultations have to be done, to change certain things. Those take a bit of time. I know that the Appendix 2 of Annex 5 for the AfCFTA, gives about to 30 days, I think, a total of 60 days maximum to really resolve, a total of 60 days to resolve the NTB. But it doesn't mean you have to wait for the 60 days to resolve. There are other issues where you have perishable products that need, urgent attention, and it's not a major legal or regulatory issue. So those would take a short time. But in terms of success, I will say most of the resolutions have been, it has recorded a success. Many of those that have been reported have been resolved, which is a very positive outlook. But then you still have the unresolved, where you have certain measures, countries not willing to move on certain measures because it is a law that maybe countries have to comply, economic operators have to comply with, and they will not be changing it, or a certain regime that certain countries will not be changing for whatever reason. So within the AfCFTA, it is mandated that resolution should not take more than 60 days. It can be within an hour, but this is I'm now talking about something that we hope happens. And in the ones that have been reported, on the 5 that have been reported, 2 that have been resolved, I think it took a bit of time, but not more than 30 days to actually resolve. And then we had to report after was because then there was COVID issue. I think this happened in early mid 2020 or so. So there isn't one specific answer. The mechanism endeavors to resolve within reasonable time. If it is within an hour, this is why the notifications are instant once the NTB has been vetted or verified. To the notifications are instant to the relevant national focal points, and the expectation is that they will stand up and resolve quickly. And this is what has happened even in the tripartite one. At least I know the information because I do engage a lot with the person that has been dealing with the back end of the system there. And there are others that we have to keep engaging governments on, and we cannot do away with this. This is why we have to keep monitoring them, bringing them to the right platforms, continuing information dissemination on them as we go. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kuena. I think that in a great depth covered the question I had, at least. So I don't see a willingness for too many questions on the chat box. So I do believe that most questions have been, or most issues at least, have been tackled. I do see one raised hand, so I'll quickly hand it over. So lady, I've given you an opportunity to pose your question, so please go ahead. So lady, can you hear us? You can go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I just wanted to find out from Kuena that the African Continental Free Trade Area, is there any member state, or is that for the continent as the whole? That's the first question. And then another question which I wanted to know is who is actually sponsoring the AfCFTA? Thank you.
Shall I go ahead?
Please go ahead, Kuena.
Yes, may.
Okay. Thank you very much. I didn't quite get the first question very well. Can you repeat that?
Okay, the first question is there any member states, or is that for the continent as the whole?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, maybe let me try to maybe put it back to you, as in, do you mean the AfCFTA
Yes.
currently now has 42 African countries who are parties to it, who have signed, who have ratified. You have 54 that have signed, but you have now 42 that have ratified, meaning they are now they now will be engaging in trade under the trading preferences within the AfCFTA.
Okay.
So you have 42 countries that are now members or state parties to the AfCFTA agreements. That means countries can now engage in trade within each other. The second one, the AfCFTA is a project of the African Union. So it is funded by the African Union members.
Yes, I know it's funded by African Union members, but is there any sponsor? That's my question. Except funding?
Sponsor as in a sponsor?
Maybe individual, maybe companies or whatever, except the government or African Union.
Okay, no, I see. Well, the operational budget comes from the African Union, and there are other, obviously, projects that are funded by different entities, with interest in different areas. But the main funder is the African Union.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something which, sorry to take your time. So there's something which is bothering me. Coming to this reporting issue, that does not maybe sometime have a problem with the language interpretation.
Yeah, I think, as I said, that the languages of the African Union, you have, Arabic, Portuguese, French, and English, and now Swahili as the official languages of the African Union. Now, that means we have to endeavor as much as possible from an official point of view to communicate in those now 5 languages. Now, does it mean if you come to, for instance, the many African countries, you come to South Africa, for instance, you have Chivenda, you have Xhosa, you have Pedi. It's not in those languages. So the expectation is that the countries will now take responsibility in disseminating further in the local languages. But if you were interacting with it on the basis of the official languages, you would be able to get that done. But if you are doing it on the basis of the local languages, many of the local languages, which many of African countries have many dialects, then it must now be the responsibilities of the national authorities.
That's great.
Kuena, I don't see any other questions. So perhaps I can take this opportunity to thank you so much for your presentation and just showing us the online tool, and then also to thank Trudi for her time in showcasing the different trade costs and NTBs and how it affects us. So before I hand over to our Vice Chair, to Fred from Rwanda, I would just like to really encourage all our members and all traders to make use of these online tools, as it can, really help us to reduce those trade costs and non-trade barriers that we do have in our region, and to prosper under the AfCFTA, which I think is just a fabulous opportunity for Africa to embrace the time that we now have been given to us. So thank you so much, Kuena. Thank you, Trudi. I hand over to our Vice Chair for some final thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Thank you so much for guiding this Q&A time. And it was so brilliant. The time is not our side, but we would like to hear more from our speakers. They have more to share with us. We really thank them for their time and the sharing with the audience. And I want to thank also the comment in the Q&A from our members, participants. We need to know more and to have more and more. As we are aware, the funds are coming from African Union levy in each and every country which has been ratified. I think we pay 0.2% on import entered in these ratified countries. That's the funds which are now working with African Union on these activities. Do not take you much more time as we are moving with our time. I would now like to call upon for the closing remarks. Will be given the closing by Larry Diza, the Director, World Customs Organization, East and Southern Africa, Region Office for Capacity Building. Is going to give us our closing remarks as we are ending up with our meeting of today. You're most welcome.
Thank you so much, Fred. I'm afraid Larry has just also mentioned to us that he's currently in Brussels, in Belgium, so he couldn't connect. So with that, I can close today's meeting, and we will take hands the next time. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time. See you next time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.